The Honourable Nanaia Mahuta.
Mr Chair, I want to take a call on part 1 of this bill, and I am concerned that the intent of the bill is, in its title, to support for children in hardship bill, that it will actually have the reverse effect. I think the Minister should take a couple of moments to reflect on many of the statements that have been made so far, but I'd like her to answer a few questions, because the children who this bill purports to help, their parents require some answers. One of the questions I had around the reduction of age for work readiness from 5 to 3 is, what evidence did the Minister rely on to support a uniform measure such as this? In fact, the member prior to me, Jan Logie, made comment about attachment issues for children, and usually between 2 to 3, and I'm sure the Minister will know because she understands this as a woman, between 2 to 3 there are attachment issues, and it is difficult for women particularly to leave the home if there are not some strong key relationships within the household. So what was the evidence to show that reducing the age from 5 to 3 so that a mother would be able to be tested for work readiness would actually be in the best interests of the child? That's question number 1. I think it's a fair question. It should be asked. The other thing about the reduction in age, what we do know from practical experience, and I know members will relate to this throughout the House, is often between 1 and 5, that's when you're experiencing a number of challenges with the general health of your child. There are numerous situations where unexpectedly you're taking your child to the doctor because of a cough that developed in the night, or if they've got eczema, those types of things, all sorts of medical issues which will require you to actually understand your child as they're growing in the most critical stages of their lives, often 1 to 3, but more likely you're getting a grip on it from 1 to 5. So again, this comes back to the evidence that the Minister relied on, that it was in the best interests of the child to ensure that dropping the age from 5 to 3 for a parent to be work ready and tested for that. The other part of that question, Minister, is that even if a parent was able to be work tested at the stage of 3, often, if you're living in small communities, there is scarce pickings for jobs, and that is a reality. It's not just a statement, it is a reality. So, in that instance, people might need to travel further afield from their own local community with the prospect of a job. I have heard time and time again, and it's funny that when you're a mother of young children, you tend to get all the types of stories that you can hear around children of the same age as yours, where the demoralising part of going into work and income for your work readiness test is having to tell your story again and again and again, and being told that there are no jobs available for a particular period of time, and then that actually doesn't do anything for your self-esteem. The other story that I heard of a young mother who was wanting to do the best by her child and was helping out at the local kohanga, doing things like driving the van, helping to make the kai and things like that. Then she got notified by her work and income caseworker, that she had to go in for a test, and then she had to really start being active around looking for a job. And she saw me at her kohanga and she asked me, isn't helping my child at the kohanga and helping the kohanga out a better thing for me and my child and in my community? And I looked her straight in the eye and I said, yes, it is. In fact, 15 hours spent longer with your child is much better for your child and this kohanga community than you going out to work and constantly worrying about the care of your child. There are other circumstances which put her, her own views about the safety of her child in another category. But the point, Minister, is that often there are not jobs. The whole process of going to work and income can be demoralising if you're constantly being told there are no jobs. The issues of travel are very real, especially when you're in a small community. But again, what evidence did the Minister rely on, did you, Minister, rely on to give you an assurance that, Mr Chair,
Nanaia Mahuta.
to give you a reliance that this was in the best interest of the child, to reduce the age from 5 to 3 for work readiness? The other aspect of this is that in terms of the travel components, if the parent does not have access to their own transport and public transport isn't available, the very real challenges of getting to and from a place of work becomes stressful. If you get called and you're a sole parent looking after your children and you get called at your part-time job that you have to come and pick up your child because of an illness or something that's happened at your early childhood centre, it may not be that simple just to go back and get your child. There could be costs, there could be, again, public transport issues that prevent that. That creates more stress for the parent. It doesn't help either the parent or the child lead, a positive environment for their upbringing. Here's another question, Minister. If the reality was that the best that a parent could do is find maybe 10 hours cleaning and then maybe 5 hours making up for it driving the kohanga van, but they are doing something purposeful, is there enough flexibility in the system for that type of situation to be accommodated? I suspect not, but the question needs to be asked because we're talking about real people, real kids, and opportunities that that are actually the only opportunities available. Mr Speaker, I know that the Minister's dying to get onto her feet and answer some of these very valid questions because they are important. But here's the final point that I'd like to make, and it's really around the voluntary contribution of parents assisting in the in the environment, especially early childhood education. What we know specifically for Māori and Pacific families, lifting the rates of early childhood participation is a challenge in and of itself. If there is broader scope to ensure that the contribution of parents in this voluntary way to support their early childhood centre or their kohanga or puna reo, will this ever be recognised as a valuable contribution to the raising of children and the building of community? I think it's about time we did do that because for far too long we negate the importance of children's early years and the value of the contribution of the parent. I agree with most of the sentiments that have been made on this side of the House. Lifting household incomes will make a fundamental difference to alleviating pressure of some of the most vulnerable families. The question I have around this bill is it doesn't take account of some of the realities that families are living in on a day-to-day basis, the valuable contribution that parents can make in those early years by being with their children, not being forced out to work, but more importantly, if there is no work, let's get real, Minister. There has to be enough flexibility and scope within the intent of this bill to account for the voluntary contribution that parents can make to raising their child in their community, spending time with their child, to be able to actually have a stronger and more resilient individual coming through the pipeline, and that's in terms of Bureau speak. I am concerned about one other aspect, and that's the way in which the poverty is being referred to, material hardship. You know, poverty is poverty. There's no gradient about it. It's unacceptable in New Zealand that we don't have a target to actually try and assure ourselves that across all policy areas that reducing poverty can be measured in a very consistent way across a range of policies. In and of itself, Minister, I know that you know these are difficult and challenging issues. What MSD does can't be divorced from what happens in housing, what happens in health, what happens in employment. But if we had a consistent measure around child poverty and how the combination of policies actually impact on alleviating pressures for the most vulnerable, our children in our society, then we would be going a long way towards making a difference. I fear that this bill will not achieve its intent. It won't support children in hardship. It will actually make it much more difficult. and that's the concern. I support the amendments that are being proposed by Carmel Sepuloni, my colleague, in terms of ensuring that the age issue is reverted back to 5. It needs to happen.